here that have time commitments on flights. So in the essence of that, we're going to take about 15 minutes here total to review the TSO updates. And Charter USA, I'm going to call you first since you have the flight issue. The board has received the quarterly updates, and so they may have questions, but if you could do just a brief 5-minute presentation, that would be great if you wish. So we're going to do the TSO update underneath discussion. Charter USA, you may go first.
We're just waiting on the PowerPoint. Good afternoon. Tamara Wright, Director of Turnaround Schools for the Mayor's Office, and I'm just here to present, I'm going to go rather quickly, to provide an update and overview of the Turnaround Academies. And we have here the newly hired Regional Director for Charter Schools USA, and I wanted her to be able to be here to answer any specific questions you have regarding the schools.
And do we have this presentation?
Amy Walker has joined the conference.
Did you have it?
We sent it.
Yes, I think we have it. Are you bringing it up?
I think that's... Okay. I don't know if we're... I did.
Sure, and we have hard copies. At least I do.
I think we have them all in a folder.
I think it was sent to us. I have it under a tab called, well, at least my tab's under Ed Power, because it's the start of it. Did we find it? Why don't you go ahead and begin? We'll see if we can locate it.
Okay. So I am here today to provide an update on our oversight, and I thank the board for allowing me to present this information. Before we get started, I briefly wanted to comment on some of the questions that were brought to the board's attention from Mrs. Craig and Mrs. Gore, because I think their questions are valid, their concerns are extremely important, and they've shared those concerns with our office, and we've in turn shared those concerns with the turnaround operators and made recommendations and provided feedback. I think the challenge is that our office doesn't have the ability to mandate that schools make changes or enact certain policies if they're not, because the schools are abiding by federal and state laws, but we do proactively present all that information to the schools and the concerns of the community because they're very important. So I just wanted to convey that we do really value the comments and the concerns that were brought to the board's attention and have proactively shared that information. And I know that Mrs. Craig and Mrs. Gore have also reached out to the Department of Education, and they've also proactively shared that information with the operators and myself. So I think there is a concerted effort on the parts of both agencies to make sure that the schools are aware of the need to make sure that their policies and procedures are equitable to all students. So in terms of our oversight, and I have a hard copy of the presentation, the PowerPoint.
is it entitled, just so?
It's Office of Education Innovation, State Board of Education presentation.
It might have been submitted to you under Ed Power.
Okay.
No, that's the template.
I have a whole PowerPoint.
I'm not entirely sure what happened, but we did provide.
I don't know.
That's the charter
Why don't
school.
you have it?
That's the charter school presentation.
Oh, well.
Okay, I can just talk us through it. Okay. So in terms of our oversight process, you all know that we monitor, analyze data, and report that information to key stakeholders such as the State Board of Education. We utilize a performance framework that includes 4 core questions. We're looking at the financial viability of the organization. Is the educational program a success? We're looking at, is the school providing the appropriate conditions for success? And we're also looking to see if the organization is effective and well-run. We provide the State Board of Education with a monthly template that includes information on suspensions and expulsions, staff attendance, student attendance, and enrollment and other key areas. And then we also utilize a master calendar of reporting requirements that we provide to the schools that outlines clearly every month the documentation that's required to assess the schools. So in terms of our oversight, one of the things that we did this summer is we did what we call a turnaround step back and took a look at some of the things that were working and some of the things that were not working, and really focused on the things that were within our locus of control to change. So one of the things that we did is we individualized the turnaround performance framework for each school. So we have school-specific goals. So each of the frameworks has the individual goals for the schools. So every time we're meeting with the schools, they know the specific goals and targets that they have to meet. Another thing that we've added to the information that we collect is the SIG application. The Department of Education monitors SIG funding, and we appreciate the fact that they provide that information to us in order to rank the schools in terms of whether they're meeting standard or not, but we felt it was important for us to see what was in that SIG application, so that's something that we will begin collecting as well to assess and to see, to make sure that the schools are abiding by what they outlined in their SIG application. And then finally, we came up with a calendar in advance. One thing that we were having that was posing a challenge was to ensure that we were meeting with the schools on a regular basis. As we know, with schools, things come up. Sometimes there are changes that have to be made. So basically, we outlined for the entire year for the schools the dates that we need to meet on a monthly basis. And then we've also extended our quarterly meetings so that we can have really granular discussions with the schools. And so when we present our quarterly assessment to the State Board of Education, we really went through everything with the schools. We were finding that an hour was not enough time. We were having conversations with schools, so we've extended those quarterly meetings to an hour and a half so that we can make sure that we have all the information that's necessary to present to the State Board. Okay, so in terms of performance, I know there were some questions this morning as to the progress of the turnaround schools and whether they were making gains and what we were seeing. I think that the progress that we're seeing at the schools is encouraging, but I also think we all recognize that we have a long way to go. And I know it's difficult and challenging and understandably from a community perspective that we want to see these kids succeed and we want to see these kids grow quickly. But if you look at Mass Insight's evaluating school turnaround report from September of 2010, school turnaround can take an average of 3 to 5 years. And I think we are actually in year 2 of this. 11-12 was an observation year, so we're actually in the 2nd year of turnaround. So I think it's encouraging that we're seeing gains. We recognize that we have a long way to go, but this is not something that's going to change overnight. So I think that's something that we really have to keep in mind when we're looking at this information. So in terms of the I-STEP data that was recently released.
May I ask a question about
Sure.
that? One question I'd like to ask, right? Earlier today, there was, people alluded to numbers of students changing. And I didn't know if you had any data, but I didn't know what the interpretation was supposed to be. So the day the schools, we put turnaround operators in, had they sorted out students who were struggling to bring their enrollments down, so they just had really good students, and that's why their scores went up? Is there any evidence of that? Or did it actually, was it reversed? I thought it was reversed.
Actually, it is reversed, and that was one of the concerns from the community that was, oh, thank you, Sarah. Sarah has the presentation up. And we can skip to that since we're on a time crunch.
Yeah, I just wanted to,
Absolutely.
whatever it is, we'll deal with it, but the data actually shows, it seemed to me at the time it was the other way, that we were getting students that had more challenges than were in the school last year. And so the little bit of the progress we are making is even more remarkable, if that's true.
It is, and actually I'm not sure why this is not working. It's not clicking.
And why don't we let you do your full presentation, and
Okay.
then we'll ask questions, because I want to be mindful she has a
Okay,
flight to catch.
I was just going to show you the actual data that showed that would answer that
Sure.
question, that I think that it would be good for
Maybe
you all
we
to
could
see.
focus on those schools that Charter USA is responsible for. And
Okay. Well, in terms of the gains, we're seeing TC Howe had, in terms of ELA, 13.1% increase in I-STEP, and in terms of math, a 1.5% increase. Arlington, 13.6% gains in ELA, 14.6% gains in math, and then Emma Donnan, 2.1% gains in ELA, and then 7.6% gains. So we're not seeing any dips, we're seeing gains. And as I said, the progress is encouraging. We still recognize we're far below the county and the state averages, but I do think we are seeing some progress. So that's something that's a very positive thing. To address Mr. Elsner's question in terms of the student population, that was something that the community had asked. So we took it upon ourselves to do that research to see, are we still dealing with the same student population? So when we look at Emma Donnan, for instance, and we're seeing these gains, in 2011 and 2012, which was the observation year, Emma Donnan had 87.1% free and reduced lunch students. In 2012-13, they dipped to 24.7%, and then 2013-14, where we're seeing some of these gains, 77.1% students that are FRL. So you're seeing a similar population to pre-takeover. And I think we have it on the screen. Thank you, Sarah. So if you look at the next slide with TC Howe, we're seeing the increases I just talked about, the 13.1% increase in the 1.5. In terms of the student population, in 11-12, which was the observation year, we have 79.7 FRL population. There was a dip, 31.5%, which was the first year of takeover. And now the FRL population is actually greater than it was pre-takeover. So you have 93.2% of students that are free and reduced lunch. And you have very similar populations of SPED students from 2012-13 to 2013-14. So you're dealing with similar populations. In terms of Arlington, which is the next slide. Thanks, Sarah. You're seeing increases in ELA and math, and you're also seeing increases in the FRL population. So you had 67.9% of students in 11-12. That increased to 86.7% of students in 12-13, and then 96.8% of students in 2013 and 14. And then finally, Emmanuel High School, which doesn't have I-STEP, we still wanted to take a look at their student population. So you had 82% of students that were FRL pre-takeover, then you had a drop, and then you had a significant increase of 90.8% students that are free and reduced lunch. So in terms of the performance of the schools, Emma Donnan, on our framework, which assesses the schools on 23 indicators, they're meeting standard in all areas, and they have been pretty consistent throughout all of the quarters. One of the areas in which they struggle is school attendance, and they're currently not meeting standard in that area. If you look at Manual was meeting standard on 3 areas, approaching standard in 1 area, and once again, still struggling with attendance and not meeting in that area. Some of the areas in terms of TC Howe was approaching standard in 3 areas, meeting standard in terms of SIG funding, and once again, still struggling with attendance. and not meeting standard in that area. And then finally, Arlington was meeting standard in 2 areas, approaching standard in terms of organizational leadership and communication, and then approaching standard in terms of attendance. So in terms of quickly some of the next steps in terms of our oversight, because we're constantly looking at ways that we can be more efficient and more effective in our oversight. So continuing to monitor the schools, provide transparent and accurate information to the state board. We're objective in this, so if the information is positive, that's great. If the information shows need for improvement, that we're going to present that information as well. We would just want to make sure that the schools are providing the support necessary to have these students be successful. Yes.
In the data that you presented to us, you showed a lot of things with professional development. Could you bring something back to us in the next quarter of how effective that was?
Absolutely.
And how they evaluated whether it was effective? Because you can go to one-time things and not get anything. So I want to just see if it was, you know, implemented and where they are on track on that.
Absolutely.
Drive through or sit down?
We're also in the process of finalizing a data share agreement with the DOE. I think that was one of the things we discussed previously, the challenge of getting the data that we needed from the schools in a timely manner. So we're working with the department to be able to access that data very quickly so that we can analyze that data when we're having meetings with the schools. We'll have our first quarter assessments, and then once that ECA data comes out, we'll assess that information and provide that information to the board. CSUSA has hired a regional director who is here. I requested that Arlington, Tinley Accelerated Schools be here as well. But if you have any questions regarding CSUSA, she's here to answer any questions about their progress that you may have.
So I'd like just a quick question.
Sure.
So does the Q4 report, is that just over Q4?
Yes.
Or is that the whole year?
So the whole year will be published once we have the accountability data. So what I've been providing is every quarter's information. So what you're seeing for Q4 is from April to June, an assessment of the school's performance. But if you look at the 4 quarters, you can kind of see where the schools are trending. For instance, Emma Donnan has pretty much been meeting standard in every area. Arlington continues to approach standard in one of the areas. So you can kind of gauge in terms of the core questions and the indicators where the schools are going to kind of trend and be at the end of the year with the accountability report.
Well, I'd like you to introduce yourself and at least talk to us about your role in the
Yes,
two
ma'am.
schools.
As said before, my name is Teresa Brown, and I am the new regional director for our Indianapolis schools. I have been active in the background with the schools since we started up here in this partnership. I came up about every 6 weeks to do quality assurance type visits to help monitor from our standpoint. So I've always been very vested in these schools. One of the things, I was a principal with Charter Schools USA for a while. I also was a principal with Charter Schools USA at a Title I school. We had about 90% free and reduced lunch. So I understand a lot of the issues that these schools go through on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that was said this morning that really touched my heart was the fact that there's not one person sitting in this room that's in the city of Indianapolis that don't want all these schools and all these kids to be successful. I know from just the history of making true change and true impact in schools, it takes everybody. It's going to take this whole community, and we want to be great community partners. One of my big initiatives is to deal with the attendance and to get these students motivated to be here, to get in school and really find out what the key underlying motivation is for these students. Attendance is huge. We can't teach them if they're not there. So that's something that we are having conversations about. The other thing is to reach out to the community to make sure that there's more visibility to meet the needs of the community. So those are some of our goals. Are we satisfied with our progress? Absolutely not. We're not going to be satisfied till everybody's on grade level, and we're going to push in order to make that happen. But you know, true change doesn't happen overnight, and I appreciate your support. And I also have learned that I'll never schedule a flight on these meeting days. Do you guys have any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Andrea?
I got the impression this morning from the speakers, they feel the charter operators are not transparent with data, particularly with regards to expulsion, suspension policies, and for non-criminal offenses. Can you talk about the data availability and what the data shows in that regard?
Absolutely. Some of the programs, we look at data on a weekly, monthly basis. We report out, to everybody that we need to report out to. But we track it. Like, one of the things that we're really trying to do within our schools is not always harp on the punitive, but to start really more of a positive type of attitude with discipline. So the students aren't constantly getting don't, but wow, way to go, that's awesome. And really creating a cultural change. From one of the other things that we're doing is, so we don't go to expulsion, is give these students different opportunities within the building. So a child might be having a really poor decision day, and we might need to take some alternative routes where we've set up different programs where, one, they can get extra remediation, they can get work with a teacher in a very small group, almost like a timeout, but an academic. With smaller groups, and so they have more attention, and to get them back on track. The last thing that anybody wants to do is for a child not to be in school. It goes and it feeds right into the attendance. So we want to do that. And our reporting is as visible as our requirements are. There's definitely nothing to not be visible about. So I think my question would be, when I'm going to seek out these community members and say, what do you need? And I think that's important that we have that dialogue and that conversation, is what is the expectation? What do you feel like is not being communicated?
Because it seems like there's a disconnect
Mhm.
between what they perceive as the suspension expulsion policy and what you're saying. And
Absolutely. And I want to have those conversations. I really want to get everybody that was here and have that. What do you need? Like, there's got to be better open communication about this issue.
And do you have an average expulsion rate for the schools you're operating?
Not off the top of my head. It is there. I don't know it right off the top of my head, but it was not as extreme as what was stated this morning in any way, shape, or form, because the last thing you want to do is to expel a child. I can get that information for you, though.
Any more questions? Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Good
you.
luck in your
I look
flight.
forward to working with you guys.
I did want to add, we did have that expulsion information. I think Ms. Craig quoted 24%, but for 2012-13, there were a total of 38 expulsions amongst all 4 turnaround academies. So that's the expulsion rate, and then we can provide that 13-14 data for you.
So,
32 people?
38 students amongst all 4 schools.
and I'm not sure she had, for 2012-13,
That's what I just said. 2012-13 was 38. I believe she said 24%, but I didn't know what year she was referring to.
Well, did you get a copy of this?
I did not.
Here you go, for both of you. But the information on here is 2011-12, because that's the information they had.
Okay, so for 12-13, it was 38 students amongst all 4 turnaround academies.
For expulsions.
Expulsions, that's correct, Superintendent.
David?
I really appreciate the mayor's office. Every time I've asked questions of how is it going in Indianapolis, I get great data, rich data. And so whatever operator we're working with, Charter USA or the others in Indianapolis, your office and the deputy mayor's office has been tremendous. And I think it's a real model of how a city can work together with our turnaround operators to have it an effective, positive kind of experience, not only for the city, but as us, as the board, trying to oversee this great thing we call public education and private education. So thank you for that, and please take that back to the deputy
Thank you,
mayor.
Dr. Freitas.
Thank you. So I believe, Teresa, you want to give a quick update on Theodore Roosevelt, and then we'll go into our next items. And I know you prepared a PowerPoint, but if you could be brief, that would be great.
All right, absolutely.
No policy, policy.
So, in preparation for this, I actually received an email this morning from Edison and their operators in Gary Community Schools. They knew that I was coming to speak with you, and they asked me to update you, if that's okay.
Sure.
Regarding their work together in collaborating through the issues. So it was pretty encouraging. I thought you would actually probably like to hear this. They said to let you know that Edison Learning and Gary Community Schools have established a partnership. They have a shared vision and a commitment to work together for the best educational opportunities for the children in Gary. They've changed their conversation. They've helped minimize their differing viewpoints, and they've provided greater clarity to their respective roles and responsibilities. They have withdrawn their adverse action to signal to you that their conversations between Gary Community Schools and Edison have changed. It also highlights their belief that the solution to the challenges facing education in Gary today can be found in open and honest collaboration. Dr. Pruitt, Gary Superintendent, and Tom Jackson, the President and CEO of Edison Learning, firmly believe that the roles of their organizations are not separate, as they're very much linked together. The fact that the school district and an outside educational services provider have committed to work together in school turnaround is unique. As a result, the true beneficiaries will be the students in Gary. Both organizations have together resolved a number of their issues and will continue to work collaboratively to address their other issues. Gary and Edison also wanted you to know that they are working together on solutions on facility issues, including using Roosevelt to house middle school students potentially in the future, which would save the district and allow them to combine and maximize resources and student services. So they've made some great progress in the last month or so, and they just wanted you to know that.
And I would comment that there's been new leadership at Edison as well. Okay.
Have you been involved in these discussions as well?
No.
No, that's been between the
No.
attorneys have been involved. They just let us know today. So, is this working? No? Maybe. Maybe my clicker. Thank you. So the last time I came, I shared with you the protocol for monitoring and oversight. That protocol remains the same. The outreach coordinators in Region 6, Daniel Bundridge and Linda Randolph, visit the schools every 2 to 4 weeks, providing direct oversight and visiting classrooms. We have monthly reports, as you know, that the TSOs submit to us, and then we have the quarterly progress reports that I'm giving you today. Just as the mayor's office indicated to you that it's a very transparent process and they tell you the good and the bad and the ugly, the same is true for us. I will be very honest with you about their successes and their challenges. So they had 10 goal questions. Number 1, is the educational program a success? Goal number 1 is student attendance. Their benchmark was 92%. That's where they wanted to go. 78% was actually where they started 2012-13 data. And so their goal was to achieve 92. At the end of June, their attendance for the year, their ADM was actually 64.49%, which I'm going to talk about that more in just a little bit. Goal 2 was 90% staff attendance, and as you can see, they did reach that goal. They have 93.8%. Goal 3, reducing office discipline referrals by 10%. In May of 2013, they had 17.5 daily incidents. This year, they had 10.9 in that same time period. Reducing school suspensions by 10%. Their out-of-school suspension rate was 119 in May. On your 3-month report, which I'm going to look at with you in just a second, you'll see 0 reported for June, but again, they were in school for 5 days in June, so that's the reason why June looks really good. Goal number 5 is reducing the undercredited students by 10%, and then you can currently see the benchmarks of where those lie. And I'm going to suggest to you that probably some of the issues with that is attendance. Goal number 6, improving the graduation rate to 73%. In 2012, it was 47%, 2013, 41.3. We don't have that data yet for the last school year that just ended. Goal number 7, 65% of the students will enroll in a 2 to 4 year college, and they're currently at 60%. Goal number 8 includes the most recent ISTEP scores. So their goal was to increase ISTEP pass rates for grades 7 and 8 by 5%. You can see the scores from 2012-13, and then 2013-14. They did meet that benchmark for ELA. They increased from 28.6 to 36%, and from 29.6 to 37%. In math, however, they did not see those same gains. Goal number 9 was to increase the percent of ECA scores by 5%, and they actually did exceed their 5% in Algebra 1. They went from 13.5% last year to 31.4%, which is a pretty significant gain. In English, the opposite is true, though. They did not. They went up just a little bit from 23.8 to 24, but certainly not the 5% that they were trying to attain. And then goal number 10, increasing the percent of students taking advanced placement exams. In 2012-13, they had 0%. I did verify with them, they still have 0% for this year, so they did not increase yet the number of students or any students taking AP exams. So core question number 2, is your school providing appropriate conditions for success? Again, looking at the student enrollment. So you can see from September 13, the average daily attendance was 618. Then in April, you can see their attendance was 540, in May 543, and in June 543. So I'm going to go ahead and forward, Danielle. You'll see that that decrease actually is impacting, obviously, their financial piece as well. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. So their student attendance, you can see from April, May, and June. So in April, their average daily attendance, or ADM, actually was 70%. In May, they were at 72%. And then at the end of the school year, they were at 64.49%. And that's actually their ADM for the school year. So it's not just June. That's their school year attendance rate. They had a really good attendance rate, actually, in grades 7, 8, and 12. All 3 of those were above 90%. Grades 9, 10, and 11 were very poor. Grade 11, I believe, was 18%. So very poor attendance in grades 9, 10, and 11. And that's what caused that 64%. It's not reflective of grades 7, 8, and 12. Those are actually quite high. So student suspensions, again, you can see they stay pretty consistent. They don't have expulsions. They have like an alternative to expulsion. They have a small number of kids, about 10 or 11, who attend their alternative program. And then they have the student suspensions, 118, 119. That's what running pretty typical each month. So staff attendance actually is relatively good, 98%, 97%, 93%. That's been pretty typical every month. Their staff attendance is actually quite high. They did have, if you notice, in the terminations in June, they had 23 terminations. I did verify, that just seemed awfully high to me. And they said that was actually an accurate number for the end of the year. Some were not renewed. Some were terminated based on numbers. They had to downsize. And then there will be some that will be filled as well. So the fiscal health, I alluded to this when we talked about enrollment a minute ago, but they had 618 students in September. As we know, enrollment impacts their tuition support, right? So in February, they had 595 students for their second count day. In May, their enrollment count was 550. That 550 is actually used for their current payments, that estimate. So when you look at that decline of 68 students from September 13th, and each student is $5,053.19, their enrollment decline, the fiscal impact is $343,616.92. So that's having a definite impact on them financially. So on on-site monitoring visits, we continue to see it's an extremely safe and orderly environment. They have very clear routines established, passing periods, classroom behavior, all of those things are working well. Positive relationships between the staff, the principal, the students. You see that when you walk through the school. It's a very positive academic culture. They have ongoing professional learning, weekly, daily sometimes. The principal is definitely an instructional leader. They have a strong leader. She's been there 2 years, and she has the buy-in from the staff. Staff attendance is good. They have had a reduction in office referrals and certainly increased scores in English language arts in 7 and 8. Areas needing developed, many of these I shared with you previously, increasing their level of rigor. They have a blended learning program going, and some of that we have some concerns about when we do monitoring visits. The rigor just seems to be absent in some of their instructional activities. We've had that conversation with them about increasing critical thinking and application of learning. They absolutely agree. They're working on those things and engaging students at a much higher level. We've also suggested differentiating learning, that needs to continue, the active engagement, ensuring students understand their data and they own it themselves, improving their student achievement results. So we see some early gains, and just like Tamara shared, this is really just the end of the second year, but we know we need to continue to see those rates increase, particularly the attendance rate. That's a real concern from us. Reducing the undercredited students and improving their out-of-school suspension rates. So the next steps, obviously we're going to continue our ongoing monitoring. It's a very collaborative process. We have regular conversations, meetings, and partnering with the Edison Learning Group and their school people. I want to also have a conversation with them about their attendance and partnering with the Gary Police Department. There is a program already up in northern Indiana, and it's called Project Rebuild, where all the stakeholders work together through the courts to assist with truancy. And so I want to talk to Roosevelt and see kind of where they are in that process and if they're utilizing that resource. And if not, certainly connect them with that so that that's being done with fidelity. In 2014-15, they are implementing a new research-based benchmarking system they call iReady. It's research-based. It's being used with hundreds of thousands of kids. It assesses student performance levels, and it gives staff immediate feedback on skill mastery and next steps. So they're hoping that that assists them in preparing kids on a daily basis. And that is it.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, Andrea?
I assume the reason 12th graders attend is because they're so close to graduating.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be my assumption.
What are the 9th, 10th, and 11th graders doing when they're not attending school? Is there any data on that?
You know, I'm not sure exactly what that issue is. Is Edison here? I had invited them to come today as well. I'm not sure what they've been doing. I just know that when I look at those rates, there's a significant decline between 7 and 8 and 9, 10, and 11. And the attendance rate's very low across the board in all 3 grade levels.
And were the 9th graders attending as 8th graders?
I would have to go back and look at that data. I don't want to misinform you.
Are they talking about adding 5th and 6th grade then to that buildings?
I don't know what Gary and Edison has talked. I just got that email this morning. I don't think any decision's been made at this point. I think they're just having conversations about how to better utilize the facility for both groups. That's all I know.
Okay.
Is that it?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right. We are on board operating procedures discussion on the ad hoc committee. And underneath that, there's to be a discussion about parliamentarian. So, I'm sorry.
Did we cover items L and M? I'm just trying to make sure. I know we jumped off track there, but did we cover? We did Perkins funding?
Yes.
Okay. That's right.
And M got stricken.
That's when you were sleeping.
Thanks.
I was going to say, I have them checked off.
I'm toggling between the previous agenda because the hyperlinks are there and trying to toggle between this one.
Oh.
And the thing is throwing me off.
You were sleeping so well, we didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah. Well, I'm rested now. Let's go.
All right, so the ad hoc committee met on July 25th, and we discussed the items that were presented in the last resolution for us to have conversation about. And the committee felt strongly that we had recommendations to bring to you regarding the special meetings and the regular meetings. We wanted to have an opportunity as a committee, though, to gather some input regarding the other 3 items and talk to you about our conversation. And so I think that perhaps Troy wants to have some comments about this, but I will let you know that under clarification regarding the applicability of the appeals section of the procedures, we were actually trying to deal with the actual items that caused the dispute that we have, which is adding action items at a last minute kind of date. And so we talked about several ways to probably mitigate that. And then we also talked about the special committees, and our goal really as a committee was to just try to not even have them as a dispute issue, so that there isn't any need for appeals because we just won't be dealing with it. Then the second item, the addition of a new section requiring the resolving of disputes. We had a good conversation, and we had some suggestions that we didn't know if we wanted to propose to you, because we've always proposed action regarding board procedures that we think will be acceptable to everyone on the committee. And so we had some different ideas come forth, and so we wanted to bring them to your attention and go back and work on language that we might want to do. And then the third one, removing the separate ad hoc committee. We had a good discussion about the committee structures that are in place now and versus the ad hoc committee, and so we wanted to gather some input with that. So with that, I know Troy had some very firm thoughts at the committee meeting, and Andrea, you two just go ahead and talk.
I was looking at, one of the concerns that keeps being brought up is when we add items to the agenda within the outside the framework of what is defined in the 7-day idea that we submit the thing in 7 business days, and adding stuff to the agenda. If we would eliminate doing that, it would help a great deal, because number one, our agenda is public notice, and so that it opens it up so public can have more access to it. But if we all agree to keep that, then that eliminates a lot of the issues that come up, because people will bring, I want to bring this up at this meeting at this time, and I will really feel, honestly, I do not have the information. I've heard Sarah several times, I've heard other board members several times say, I haven't had time to evaluate this, and I think that's listed here, but the chair and 3 other members can add something to the board, and if we'd eliminate that and strike that from our discussion and have it be able to be within the time frame, I think it would be better. I thought that was a very, easy solution, and I will tell you this, the board policies and procedures were followed the last time, and we just got to guarantee that they're going to be followed every time. And what we have to do is, if we have that understanding, it makes it a little bit easier to do. Now, if you have an emergency come up, there is a item in our procedures that it calls for special meetings, and that can be done too. And I thought that was a good discussion that we had, so that could address something that may come from a discussion item that you want to do an action item, and you can't add it to your agenda because it can't be adjusted. It could be voted on at that meeting, though, to have a special meeting. So I felt like we wanted to bring it back to you. We didn't feel like we could get a consensus by having it in writing. I wouldn't have wanted to see it today or 7 days prior in writing to have that. I'd rather have this discussion here openly and decide what you guys want to do with it.
There were also, regarding that topic, I know Troy said, let's just not have emergency things put on. And I said, well, there was also conversation that maybe we should have, if they're put on, that it happens prior to the meeting, the day of the meeting, not at the meeting. So that everybody has a copy of what it is, even if it's the day before, so that we all are kind of clear on that, and pretty much the same way that we do a special meeting, that you could, it takes 3 people on the special meeting. I mean, we just email, I want to put it on, or whatever you want, I want the special meeting, that we could do it the very same kind of way to put something on the agenda. It would take 3 people and the superintendent to put something on the agenda. So we had a conversation around really just putting items on. The emergency piece that was put in here originally was to in case we really had an emergency we need to do. So when Troy brought up, hey, maybe we shouldn't have emergency clause at all, I said, well, then that would make my department, guys, there's no last minute things. So you have to know what it is that needs to come on for the board to be approving at the meeting. And the only recourse that I would have at that point would be to actually call a special meeting, which nobody wants to call special meetings. So that was the conversation that we had, trying to actually mitigate the actual concern of emergency items being added to avoid disputes at the board concerning them, and to move forward. But we didn't want to propose any language. I think we felt we wanted to get everybody's opinion and then go back as a committee and work with whatever we needed to work with in whatever area that was going to resolve the concern. Carrie?
Is this action items? Is this discussion items? Is this anything? Is this?
It actually was revolving around action items, I believe. It says final action, requiring final action.
Okay.
So no, it's not everything. It's just those items requiring final action. And then that's really what we're talking about in the actual proposal for us to look at. So no, it's only action items, only items that take action, so that every board member could have a copy of what it is we're taking action on and how that works. Troy's recommendation, let's just stay with the 7 days and let that be it. Then everybody gets things 5 days ahead of time, and there's no issue to even talk about. So that was Troy's suggestion, and he said, let's take it back to the board, and so that's why we're here. Brad?
Was there discussion, I appreciate the work, by the way, was there discussion about what is the board's recourse when there is an item that's on there 7 days in advance, but we don't get materials until 9:30 on the evening of the meeting, on the eve of the evening, eve of the meeting, sorry.
Yeah.
Because that has happened on multiple occasions.
You are so right.
So and I'm saying that because, you know, in one instance at the special board meeting in June, when I brought a resolution, it was in direct response to the fact that we hadn't seen anything, we're being asked to move. So how do we deal with that when we don't get things we need to evaluate?
Well, I think it was clarified, and I'm looking on there, that items would have to be received. What was it? We discussed 72 hours, I thought it was. I mean, it was enough time so that case would be adjusted. So like you could make the recommendation, the department, the state board staff would have time to correspond with the person that's making the request, but they were also, we would have to have that material in advance, and it couldn't be in terms of that day.
So let me talk to you about what's happening now, because we weren't supposed to address the 5-day concern in what you gave us our charge to do, but I want to talk to you about what we're doing along with the State Board of Ed staff. So my staff has been informed that things will be ready 5 days in advance, period, and the State Board of Ed staff, and you may have noticed what happened at this last time. We at the close of our business day, we sent out the agenda, and you did not have all the materials, okay? And so I believe the State Board of Education staff sent out the remainder of the materials 5 days in advance later on that evening, and then we went ahead and reissued your agenda with all of the items in there, making sure that you have them. We've had conversation amongst us about that. It's a joint responsibility to get all of those items prepared and get them done. And we also had conversation that we've been working like crazy people to try to get them done, but we're working even crazier to get them done within 5 days of that. So my department has been told we will have them ready on that day, and so that backs us up even further. There also are times when the State Board of Education staff and our staff, we are actually working to bring you, and an example was today. I mean, it happened. And I don't know that we need to apologize for it. It happened. So we were given the concerns regarding the A to F, and we came up with a solution to have an emergency rule. That happened after we gave you the information. We gave you some information regarding the two topics, and this will happen time to time. I mean, I don't know how else to do it. But we worked diligently together up till last night to be sure to prepare something for you, because an emergency rule was the best way to proceed regarding the information. So we don't have any desire at the department to get things to you late. I mean, that is not what we're doing here. We want to get it out to you 5 days in advance. But we did talk about the appeal piece. We did talk about the issue regarding putting things on the day of, putting things on that people didn't really have knowledge about. I propose, maybe we can just make sure that we have a similar procedure as we do for, putting forth a special meeting or request or something like that. And then Troy said, well, I just think we need to stick to our 7 days. We just need to stick to it, make sure we have it 5 days in advance. We all know what's going to be on the agenda, and just go from there. So we just wanted to hear your thoughts before we went back and worked with language. Yeah, Gordon?
I personally don't have a problem with keeping the 7 days in there. We do have a relief valve in the rules where it says the following exception to the 7 business day rule applies if the chair and 3 of the board members determine that an emergency or special circumstances exist. The matter may be added to the agenda for final action. Personally, however, I feel that the language should not specify that the chair and 3 of the board members need to be in agreement, because effectively that gives the chair a veto over adding things that may be considered by board members to be important. And I think it's, to me, one of the things that David and I saw at NASB conference was, in terms of parliamentary procedure, and we're going to discuss that here in a little bit, but the chair is intended to run an effective meeting. That's the purpose of having a chair of a board, and to run the meeting according to the rules that the board has established. And I just feel that this rule is kind of a special rule that provides the chair with special powers. The chair is the chair of this board, but the chair is also an equal member of the board. And, it would be as arbitrary as me suggesting that we amend this provision and say if the at-large board member and 3 other board members determine that an emergency or special circumstances exist. I just feel like there's some arbitrariness to this, and I feel like it should simply specify a certain number of board members should agree that an issue is an emergency or special circumstances. And that's no shot at the chair at all. But I do believe that it is arbitrary enough that one board member essentially has veto power and to adding something that may be important. And so I would object to that specific provision as it relates to adding items.
And I'll just speak to that really briefly, because this was a joint effort to begin with when we put this together. And so working with NASB, the chair also, in being also the dual role as the superintendent of public instruction, I have had times when I need to put something on the agenda. And it also takes 3 members for you to decide whether I can put anything on the agenda. Well, I think what Troy is suggesting, I want to make sure everybody understands what Troy was suggesting. I don't want to speak for you, Troy. Yeah. Troy's actually recommending that we consider deleting that exception altogether. And that we just, that's Troy's suggestion. Let's just deal with our 7 days. If somebody, including the department, if we have something we want to put on the agenda, it happens in the 7-day period. We get things in 5 days in advance.
Well, let me just respond to that. I disagree with that. I think the board should have the flexibility to add items to its action agenda literally an hour before the board meeting if that's necessary. If something has arisen that the board needs to consider and act on something, for instance, contract approval that we determine at the last minute has to be taken up at this meeting, then I don't think we should bind our hands by our rules. We are a board, and we can, I think, vote if we feel like we don't have enough time to consider a particular issue, then this board, in all its wisdom, can vote on whether to punt to the next meeting. But I think that we should not tie our hands and say that it's written in stone that you've got to have your proposal in 7 business days in advance, or it won't be heard. I think that's probably not in the best interest of this board.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
So the consensus of the ad hoc committee was that there is very little reason ever to have a last-minute final action agenda item added. But there would still be a safety valve, and that would be the special meeting. So if an emergency really were to arise within the 48-hour public notice standard, that is standard for public meetings, then we could use the special meeting language to tack that on to that board agenda. You could essentially have a board meeting followed that same day by a special meeting, but that those would be few and far between. But as a general rule, I think we felt unanimously that it was in the best interest of the public to not have any surprise action items on the day of, and that the special meeting language gave us a preferred safety valve to the language that was there previously.
I just think that's
Gordon, let me also add, in the meeting, then the ad hoc meeting that we had, Andrea suggested that instead of having the chair and 3 board members, that additional things would be to a 2/3 vote to be added on, which may be a situation that you could consider to be able to increase that to where it would be added on at that point and it would work with it.
I think the idea of having a relief valve where you have a special meeting the same day or shortly following or before a notice or a regular meeting of the board is a little bit, I don't know, it just seems a little contrived. It just doesn't seem to make sense if we're having a meeting. And I recognize your concern about adding things to the action agenda and making sure that everyone across the entire state has the ability to review the materials in advance. I appreciate that. I also will acknowledge that the law, the public notice law, does not require a 48-hour advance notice of the actual agenda. The agenda can change the day of the meeting by a vote of a board. That's not prohibited. So what I'm saying is I think we need to have flexibility as a board. And I disagree with that 2/3 requirement, by the way, because I think there are some things that 3 or 4 board members may want to add to an agenda that may get voted down by the majority. But the idea is that we have a right to hear it that
That's
day.
why we wanted to bring it to the group, because there is no way that, as I said, a small group could come up with a consensus and an idea, but would it be a consensus for everybody to be able to live with? Do you understand why it's brought to discussion?
So now I understand, and I understand the concerns have been with the board with not getting materials within the 5 days, and I told you that we're addressing that. But really, the disputes that we've had amongst ourselves as board members have really been revolving around last-minute resolutions, of which even the chair has not even seen the resolution at all, and the rest of the board members. And so we're trying to mitigate that, because that's going to always cause, it's always going to cause a dispute. And not whether it's good or it's bad, just the very fact that nobody's had chance to look at it or seek opinion from it or look at, know what it's really entailing before we actually take a vote. And so I think that's what we were trying to wrestle with. And so one of the ideas that I brought forth, and then Troy, had his thoughts. I was willing to put on items up to just the day prior, and have a way to do that so that we had at least a day's notice if there was going to be something new added to it, and not the day of, so that we didn't have to deal with the issue on that day. It would already be added to the agenda or not added to the agenda, because there's always the option to add it to the next agenda or to call a special meeting. There's always a way to deal with agenda items, that don't get on, that are not on a particular meeting.
I feel the need
Brad?
to correct something there, because that's not entirely an accurate statement to say that we've had resolutions. We, you know, in the 1 year I've been on the board, I've brought 3. Out of the 3, there was only 1 that came the day of. The 3 that I'm thinking
Oh, I didn't
of-
intend to say all resolutions, not in any way.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think, but the perception has been allowed to be out there amongst the public, like somehow we've brought these resolutions in our back pocket and popped them on top of people. The one back in November, I actually went and met with the department several times, made adjustments to it before I brought it here and before it was ruled improper. The only one that came without advance warning was brought under the special circumstances rule currently in the board procedures. It was brought pursuant to board procedures. It was not allowed because it did not have the vote of the chair, because it requires chair and 3 members. So subsequently, it was backed off, and that same resolution was then introduced the appropriate way for a normal action item for 5 days in advance. So I don't think there's even, I don't even think you can even say there's even been one instance where we popped something out there, because I generally felt we had a special circumstance, a special meeting on the waiver. We had not received information ahead of time, and by the way, the only thing the resolution was seeking was to say, let's stay compliant with statute and not commit ourselves to a course of action the board hasn't been involved with. So I just want to set the record straight, because I don't like that perception hanging out there, because I think every board member here has tried very hard to follow whatever we believe the meeting procedures were. Obviously, there's been issues with them, and that's reasonable. The ad hoc committee is looking at that. But that special meeting that we had the day of the waiver, I just remind everybody, there was a resolution sent to us on Saturday going into the Monday meeting, because we needed to deal with special education testing. And nobody had a cow about that. So I think it's a good reason why you don't want to have a 7-day rule personally, because I think everybody agreed we needed to move on that.
So we're just seeking input, so you guys need to, I think we want to hear from every board member regarding the topic, so that we can go back and talk about how we might be able to bring language that everybody would be comfortable with. David?
Since meeting procedures is on the agenda as an action item, I have a motion to make when that's deemed in order. So let me know when I can make my motion.
Okay.
I think the sense I get is everyone's okay with a guideline of 7 days. You know, that we all want to shoot for that, but there may be circumstances that come up at the last minute that require something to be added.
But I
And then
don't
it
want
ch-
that to be, I want that to be the practice and not the last second be the norm. Because.
I think everyone's probably in agreement
Because I want to
there.
make sure that we try our very best to do that, and I would live with that. Because I think that there are times, whether it be the special ed bringing up at the last second, I understand that, but I also think that we ought to have more conscious, because all of us have other jobs and other things that we do. And those 7 days, it takes me that long, usually after I get the agenda, to read through everything that's there.
But you don't, that's not controversial. What we're gonna do, we
Yeah.
wanna have it orderly, but when we wanna put something on, that's what board members do. And I just think we're over discussing this, frankly. I think Gordon was very much, that was a great description. Boards are in charge of how they operate. And the chair helps facilitate a meeting and keep it flowing, but that isn't a position where you control things. So if we feel a need to get something on, 2 or 3 people for discussion, then they can decide if they get a majority vote. But I don't wanna walk into it needing 2/3 vote. Let's keep it simple. Matter of fact, I think we have some pretty good language we've already put out there. I appreciate the work, but I think we're over discussing this. The problems have been, frankly, unfortunately, chair unilaterally deciding something against the majority of the board, and that just doesn't work. That doesn't work. We need to clarify that, because we have important things to do, as you said at the very beginning of the meeting, and that's disruptive. So I'd really rather discuss a motion as opposed to all sorts of possibilities.
Agreed.
Well, we're going to finish our discussion item, and then we're going to, we have an action item on here that we brought to you. Sarah, BJ, Carrie, any comments?
I think I agree with the comments that have made. I think that we are overthinking the fact that this is supposed to be a rarity. This is something that might occasionally come up. It's not something that's going to affect us with our daily practice. And that there's a professional responsibility as board members to do everything in our power to make sure these issues come through and are put on the agenda appropriately whenever possible. But the reality is that that's not always the case. I like the idea of having a very clear and concise guideline as to exactly how that is processed, and I agree with Gordon's thoughts on that matter.
I would agree. I'm sorry.
I agree,
Please go.
and I mean, we need an emergency option or outlet for that reason. It's an emergency. I mean, some things come up. The dishwasher breaks down every once in a while, and you need a, savings account to fix it. And so I don't want us to paint ourselves into a corner and not have the option to add something if we need to. And if 3 or 4 people think it's important enough to add it as an emergency item, then we should be responsible board members and do that.
Well, Andrea and Troy, I think they've given us some information, and we've I've taken notes on what it is that you'd like to see. On the other 2 items, dispute over procedures, we had some discussion about how that might be done, and so and not only deciding perhaps the dispute here at the meeting, but then about where it goes after that, because it doesn't become like that is the decision. It just is settling the dispute perhaps that we're having over that. We had some ideas, and I know Andrea particularly brought forth a solution, so maybe you want to address that?
My concern is that we not revise meeting procedures every time we have a bad meeting or every time things don't go our way. I looked at lots of other board practices, and it appeared to me that board members could, on their own initiative, suggest revisions to meeting procedures as needed. It was my idea that we simply treat revisions to meeting procedures the way we would any other resolution, with the exception of requiring a supermajority, so that changes not be brought about for light and transient causes. An example being the controversy we had over restoring general comment to the meetings. That was certainly not something that needed to go back into an ad hoc committee. It really just needed an up or down vote, and a supermajority vote on that would have been adequate. So it would be my suggestion that we don't have any special revisions to meeting procedures language, that we allow any board member, or it could be a committee, if it's the will of the board, to make suggestions to meeting procedures, but require the 2/3 passage rate.
And so then we also talked about, that kind of went dovetail with the committee piece that was in here. And so we have 2 ways of forming committees. And so one way is the chair forms a committee, and the other is by motion of the board. And so if we just left it up to the committee structure, then the superintendent wouldn't have to be involved in the discussion at all, which I don't think is the intent of the members of this board, that we revise board procedures in that manner. So I actually feel that the ad hoc committee works well, but I wanted to make sure that that we put in language there that here's some timelines in which that must be done. So that it had to be done before the next meeting. You had to get materials 5 days in advance. It had to be done in that type of manner to be sure that it was going to be appropriately done in a timely manner. So those were, Troy, did you want to add anything else to the last 2?
No.
So
Can I just say one
really,
more thing?
yeah, Andrea.
In short, the 3 of us had different ideas on the various points of contention, and rather than just adopt one idea and bring them to you, we thought discussion made sense and would be more collegial, and then we would go back and try and represent the will of the majority of the board to the best of our ability.
And with that, we did quite a bit of talking on the special meetings and the regular meetings, and we have submitted that language to you. So basically through the discussion, well actually let's get your input first on those last 2, on ad hoc committees, committee formation, and how we actually resolve the dispute piece. So I think we really want to hear from you regarding those topics. Gordon, you want to start?
No, I'll defer.
Oh, okay. Sarah?
Just a general comment, and maybe just more clarity from the committee's standpoint. But on one hand, we're told that we like the way that the ad hoc committee works and that it's an effective measure, but then by the same token, we're back here now having this conversation because the ad hoc committee was not able to make a decision without
Well, the desire of the committee was to actually bring forth language like we have before that we felt everybody would like to have.
Right.
So that was our goal. In fact, Andrea said it right off the start, and we want to be able to work through the language to be able, after hearing what you want, your needs, to be able to bring language to you that everybody is like, yeah, that's fine.
And I guess part of my concern is that we're having the conversation again another month. And for me, I have 27 new students sitting in my classroom, and I'm here because I want to do what's best for the students across our state. And the fact that we're having another conversation and a big portion of our meeting time talking about how the way we're going to operate, it's hard for me to rationalize when I'm going back and I'm missing that time with my students. So I'd like to figure out whatever we need to do so that we can operate effectively and efficiently without having to have this conversation as part of every meeting. And I don't mean for that to come off as crass, but it's not what our purpose is being here. I want to talk about how we can make policies to better enable our students to have an effective and quality education. This is about us, this isn't about them. And it's unfortunate that we're still having procedural conversations.
I appreciate the work of the
David?
ad hoc group. I'm going to make a motion that at our last
Well-
meeting on July,
We're not to the action yet.
oh, okay.
But
I'll wait.
I will let you.
I thought Sarah's plea
I'm
for
just looking at
action.
the, yeah, I thought that was a good flow
Sorry.
into
Well,
a
we have
motion.
we have action for the ad hoc, we have action for the ad hoc committee.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes.
You didn't say that at the beginning. I was
Yes.
wondering with all the comments from the ad hoc committee, whether there was any recommendations.
Yeah, we sent them to you, and we have language to propose to approve today. So we actually, you have in your possession the special meetings and the regular meetings language. And so we'll go on to action now. And so we
Were
have.
we going to have a discussion, though, on the parliamentarian and
Oh,
other issues?
Thank you, Gordon.
I just, I don't have a lot to say about this item, but I do have two things I think that would improve the operation of the meetings, and that the first would be for the board to explore having a parliamentarian who would interpret the rules and be, an impartial, arbiter of what the board operating governance procedures are. And so my thought was to throw that out to the board for discussion, but I would recommend that board staff consider two options. Number one, somebody from the Attorney General's office serving in that capacity, and number two, determining whether there are basically parliamentarians that have a certain credentials, whatever that may be, but certain credentials that we could retain an outside parliamentarian. I know a lot of different associations do this, neighborhood associations do it, and so on and so on. But I think that might be something worth considering, and then perhaps before our next meeting, we could consider a couple options as action items regarding whether we want to have a parliamentarian on board. The second
Gordon, can I make a comment on that part? Is that something that you would see being in the dispute area of our board procedures? As to resolve disputes, that the parliamentarian would do that?
Not necessarily. I think it could be a separate section all by itself that just, refers to a parliamentarian, and I'm sure there's plenty of, language out there that other state boards have that speak to what a parliamentarian's role is in board meetings. I'm not saying I know that right now, but I'm sure that it's out there. But the other point I wanted to add too is I feel like sometimes there is ambiguity in our board procedures in that the board rules, because these are crafted, as you mentioned, crafted by various parties, a number of months ago, there are a lot of occasions where they don't necessarily speak to a situation that arises at a board meeting. So I would also recommend consideration of a default clause, which would essentially state that should the board governance rules not apply to a particular situation, that we shall default to just Robert's Rules of Orders, and that shall be the default if there's an issue, and that our parliamentarian can, if one is brought on board, can address board issues under Robert's Rules, which I can't imagine would be objectionable to anybody, but that's not in here, and that's in most board governance rules. For state boards and for every other board, there's always, it's some kind of default that, that Robert's Rules are another set of commonly used board rules of order are utilized.
So the ad hoc committee wanted to have this discussion, even though we've had talk about it before, Sarah, because we're actually crafting language. And so we wanted to be clear, because we had some different ideas about how to approach things. And so we wanted to make sure that we brought them back to you. We did agree to language that you've received, where the board staff under regular meetings shall determine the location of the meetings in consultation with the chair or the chair's designee, and that the board staff, in consultation with the chair or the chair's designee, members must provide their calendar availability under special meetings within 48 hours after a request for a special meeting has been made, and following, well, wait a minute, I am reading the wrong piece. Reason I think I'm reading the wrong piece is that I think that should say 2 days. I'm needing some assistance here. Is Laura here? Bernice? And maybe I just have the wrong copy in here.
While we're waiting, can I make a quick comment?
Anyhow, it was supposed to say 2 days. I don't think we have the final version of this. Oh, I know why I don't have it. I'm looking under another piece. I apologize. I apologize. I was looking at something old. So you do have an action item concerning board operating procedure resolutions adopted under regular meetings and special meetings. And we do have the board staff shall handle meeting logistics, including securing meeting locations and streaming support for all meeting dates established by the annual meeting calendar. And then under special meetings, we have members must provide their calendar availability to the board and staff and chair or the chair's designee within 2 business days after a request for a special meeting has been made. Following this 2-day period, board staff will proceed to select a date for the special meeting, provided that a quorum that includes the chair is obtained. And so that is a change from the chair determining the date to the board staff determining the date after availability has been reached regarding the board members. So with that, we have I move that we adopt this language. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion?
I just would say on
Yes,
this
Brad?
particular motion, I would be fine with the regular meeting with the languages there. I cannot vote for the two together if that's the motion on the table, because I'm opposed to the way the special meeting is written. At the very end of the special meeting, it goes back to what Gordon said a minute ago. There are no powers enumerated to the chair in the statute, and when we write language in it, it says it has to be a date agreed upon by board members and the chair. It elevates one board member over another, and I don't think that's an appropriate role for the chair. And so for those reasons, I can't support the special meeting language, but I would be happy to vote for the regular meeting language.
So let
But
me,
I'm one person.
no, I just want to clarify what I thought I heard you say. So I'm not determining the date, but I need to be available to run the meeting. That's all it's saying.
Right, and we've had issues in the past where that has been an issue. So I'm just saying, the way it's phrased and it's the wording of it leads me to be concerned that it could be a situation where it positions the chair apart and differently than the other 10 members. It
Oh.
doesn't, in other words, it doesn't say, and going back to Gordon's example, it doesn't say when the at-large member is available or when the District 2 member is available. The language needs to be neutral in terms of how it views and appreciates each of the 11 members of the state board. And I don't think it's equal. I'm expressing an opinion.
Oh, Brad, I have to do the same thing you do. I have to provide my business days. I have to provide everything within the 2 days as well.
Okay.
And then
Call for
your
question.
staff's gonna make the meeting date. I don't know how you think that that's me determining the date.
I'm just expressing my opinion as one member of the board.
Did you get a second? I'm sorry.
Yes, I did get a second from
Okay.
Troy, I believe.
And I called vote.
Could you repeat
Okay.
the motion?
The motion was to approve the language that is in your action for regular meetings. That's giving the board staff to be totally in charge of the logistics and the locations and everything for the regular meetings, as well as giving the board staff shall handle all the logistics and everything in the special meeting, as well as they're going to seek our calendar availability within 2 days of the request for a special meeting. And then following that 2-day period, the board staff is going to select the date. And the only thing is making sure that the chair, they have to make sure that I'm going to be there to actually do it. We don't want to have a special meeting where the chair cannot attend. Carrie?
I don't want to speak for Brad, but I think the concern is if, in some ways, it's like a pocket veto. If you said, I'm not available till next month.
Oh, no, not at all. I have to tell them when I am available within so many days. They're going to set the date.
Well, it's the way the language is written. It uses the word quorum, which I interpret that.
What do you want it to say, Brad?
Well, it doesn't say calendar availability. It says quorum. So that would suggest to me that basically, as you said, almost in a pocket veto form, I could hang out there and wait indefinitely. And for those reasons, I'm just not comfortable with that language.
Call the question.
Second that.
Well, I just wanted to know what you want it to say. Andrea?
I just, this language is not controversial. It's, yes, all members are equal, but we also have a system of checks and balances, and it's, in my opinion, entirely reasonable to have a system in which you're certain that the superintendent of public instruction is available for a special meeting. And so this should not be controversial. The rest of the rule of procedures, the board's going to do what the board's going to do, but these 2 items we came to you expecting those would be easy to pass.
All right. Sarah, more discussion?
Just trying to be a problem solver because I understand what the arguments are on both sides. I think personally, and again, it's not assuming that anyone is acting in an unethical or unfair way, but I think I would feel more comfortable if it is worded this way. Following this 2-day period, board staff will proceed to select a date for the special meeting, providing that a quorum that includes the chair is obtained. I think I would feel more comfortable if it then, if anything, went on to say the meeting will be held within 1 week or some sort of timeline to ensure that it couldn't just be arbitrarily held off to an undetermined period of time. I don't know if that solves the problem, but
I'm fine with
I'm
that.
fine with that.
1 week? Is that what you want? The meeting will
I
be
don't
held
know
within
what
1
would
week?
be-
Is that reasonable? Bob? Is that reasonable?
I feel like there has to be some sort of deadline of, the meeting will happen, whether, the preference is obviously, I don't want to have a meeting without the
Could it be
chair here.
within a week of the initial call for an emergency meeting?
There has to be some
So,
bottom line.
48 hours.
What's our board staff think?
I think,
Claire?
as somebody who worked with Superintendent and Craig and Bernice and Brad for many months with Chris Amundsen, I think one of the concerns about an emergency meeting that it takes 2 weeks to schedule is that's no longer an emergency meeting, and why are we having it in the first place? So the original language was within 48 hours with the expectation that we would stick with our monthly schedule and not have so many special meetings or the need for an emergency meeting. So hopefully there are very few and far between. And actually, one of the examples was from your school, Troy. If there is a natural disaster and the I-step window has to be changed, that you can't schedule for that in advance, and you want to give the board some flexibility, which is why you want to have the ability to add a last-minute action item on an agenda. But similarly, a meeting called for special circumstances should happen in a very short, compressed time frame. So I think a week, which would include the 48-hour notice, I mean, it's got to be really compressed. Otherwise, what's the point of an emergency meeting?
And thank you, Claire, because that's exactly my point. I mean, the case in point on this was when I made the request, and I think 3 other members joined me to get a special meeting called on the waiver, and that was asked for on May the 2nd, and it took getting it on the schedule May 12th because of availability. We lost 2 weeks there. I mean, that's not acceptable.
So I hear a suggestion to add the sentence at the end, the meeting will be held within a week.
Can I make a
Andrea?
different language suggestion? That in sentence number 3, special meetings will be held within 7 business days of the request at a date and time convenient to the members, et cetera.
All right, wait, where are you putting it?
Sentence number 3, special meetings will be held within 7 business days of the request
There you go.
at a date and time convenient to the members, including the chair, and at a location determined by board staff.
So, special meetings will be held within 7 business days
Of
at a
the
date and time
request.
convenient. Okay.
Within 7 business days of the request.
Did you get that, Bob? Okay.
And you're deleting the last line, correct?
Yes. Sarah, does that sound like a good place to put it? All right.
Makes sense.
So we really have made an amendment, I guess, to it, just through kind of consensus and talking through that. So we now have that within 7 business days of the request at a date and time convenient to the members, okay? So with that, we'll go ahead and call for the vote.
Hang on one second.
Oh.
So,
Well, I thought-
So can you describe where we are? There's been a motion, seconded, and we got 2 amendments.
No.
1.
No, we were, Sarah recommended a way to compromise the discussion that we were having. And so I offered that we could insert language that dealt with a timeline, time frame. And so Andrea has last suggested special meetings will be held within 7 business days of the request at a date and time convenient to the members, including the chair, and a location determined by the board staff.
So we're gonna vote on that amendment?
Well,
I think
I said I didn't feel like we needed to make a formal amendment for it, that as of the discussion, we were okay with it, but if you want me to make a formal amendment, I certainly can.
I would like to make a motion to amend the amendment, and as well as the main motion. I would like to make a motion that, first of all, the language speaking to 2 business days be amended to 48 hours, as well as, what was the other provision? 7
days.
7 days, that not be 7 business days, but that be 7 calendar days.
So, yeah, we were trying to be cognizant of the weekends,
I'm
really.
just saying is, the request for
Because if the
special
request
meeting
comes
is on
in, then
Friday,
everybody has to be
then on
available on
Sunday,
weekends
yeah.
to,
It has to be within 7 days.
no, I mean the 48
No.
hours.
48 hours is only as to calendar availability.
And so that would count the weekends. So if you got
I'm
it on
sorry,
a
I work on the
Friday,
weekends, I check my email on the weekends. I can provide calendar availability on the weekends. I don't think that's unreasonable when we're talking about a special meeting.
We're all connected now.
Well, and again, I would agree, I would hope that, again, we're responsible, that it would be an emergency, it truly is an emergency, so.
so everybody's okay with 48 hours? All right. So we've changed 2 business days to 48 hours, and we've got within 7 days of the request. Everybody okay? All right. Ready for call for the question? Everybody understands what we're voting on? Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
I'm gonna withhold my vote for now till you come back around and think this through.
No.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes.
Oh.
Next item
I'll
is.
vote yes.
Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Tony.
Tony. Oh my gosh.
Back.
Sorry, Tony.
No.
I didn't know you were on. Oh my gosh. My apologies. My apologies. And so now we have, David, do you have a motion to bring forth regarding board operation procedures?
Yeah, I'm a little frustrated by the year-long discussion, and I'm sensitive to my colleagues here. And at our July 9th meeting, I was really impressed by the procedures that we received, and I'm not even sure where they came from. They were attached to the resolution, and made minor changes to the operating procedures. And in my mind, I read this and said, this makes a lot of sense to me. This is a positive way to operate. Although it's not 100% perfect, it does move us in the right direction in a timely kind of way. And although our last vote did make a lot of sense to me, I think this document we received at our last meeting makes even more sense. And so I will move that we adopt the July 9th version of the operating procedures, so-called the red line, because there were some red lines in there, but it was the one we received last meeting. So I will move that we adopt these as our meeting procedures.
So I'm trying to figure out what it is you're actually requesting, because that's not the same as what we just passed.
Correct?
And so in addition, there is a request for the ad hoc committee to finish its work and go back and look again at that language, and with the input that we've gotten here today, and bring the language to you. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. So you're moving to adopt what we initially, the ad hoc committee was to look at. We've come back to you with some language. We want to come back to you with the rest of it. But you want to adopt it as it was presented to the ad hoc committee originally.
Yes, correct. I think there's language in here that the ad hoc committee could not reach consensus on, that I felt what was in the July 9th version was something that I can agree with, that I think would be transparent, that would help us move issues along. And so I would strongly support, if I can get a second, that we at least have a second to discuss and see if there's consensus around this.
Can I ask a question? You're talking about the language other than the regular meetings and special meetings, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, we just did
So-
the regular meeting
Right.
So
stuff.
Other than
language
those
other
two
that were
sections.
included in here, other than those two sections?
Yes, thank you for that. That's a good clarification.
I'll second that.
Any more discussion? I guess I would say that if you vote to do that the ad hoc committee's role in bringing this to you in good faith, wanting to come back with some language that was going to work with all of the issues, we want to make sure that we can do that. I mean, that's the process that we set forth to make it happen. So we see some issues with the language as it was written, especially with the committee formation to deal with it, and so we want time to work with that language.
Can I
Just
speak to the
clarification,
motion?
if this passes, it doesn't preclude the group to come back. Anyone can come back and make motions to
It
improve
dissolves the ad hoc
operating
committee.
procedures.
It dissolves.
Part of my motion is not to dissolve the ad hoc
But
committee.
it does.
It does.
It does. That's
Okay.
what strikes it out.
Well, I think it speaks to what Sarah was talking about before, so,
Conversation.
you know, it's just
Yeah.
whether,
Yeah.
and I'll let Sarah speak to it, but, and I would also add too, that the issues that I've raised will still come back to the board next month, you know, hopefully with some language that is drafted by staff that we can consider, amend, adopt, reject,
And we're
et
wanting
cetera.
that to happen through the ad hoc committee and bring forth some language that will be, that we all can agree upon.
So I would ask that we vote on it, and people have expressed their views. Some people disagree, some people agree. Until we vote on it, then we don't know how the board feels. And so that notion being that we all have equal votes, put it to the board, 11 members get to decide, not one person decides what the will of the board will be, and that's why I'm presenting this. I'm hoping this is an evolutionary process. If we were to adopt this motion, anyone could come forward at that point, any member of the board with a new idea, and bring that forward, and we could have a discussion. So I'm hoping this is not the end, but the beginning of an evolutionary process.
May we call a question?
Roll call, please.
No.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
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 No. We have discussion items, SBOE staff update.
Superintendent Ritz, we had 2 members travel for the authorizer update, and they need to leave, and they've requested if we could move the staff update after the authorizer update. Calumet College of St. Joseph and another have to leave to go drive home. Would that be okay with the board and the chair?
Correct. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Is this working right now? Okay, all right. Well, as one of the people who has young children who didn't want to pay for the daycare after 6 o'clock, I really appreciate the board being flexible and letting us go a little bit early. My name's Nick Leroy. I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Charter School Board, and so I appreciate the opportunity to present to the State Board of Education as well as Superintendent some of the activities of the ICSB. Let's go to the next slide, Claire.
Could you talk closer to the mic?
Yeah, sure, I'm sorry. In 2011, the ICSB was founded really based upon a recommendation that NACSA, the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, put forth to say that best practice for a state is to have an independent statewide charter school authorizer. And so based upon that recommendation, the ICSB was created, and we report to a board of seven members who are appointed in a bipartisan nature and really represent perspectives from around the state. We currently operate under the statute that allows us to charge up to 3%. However, the ICSB has taken the approach to minimize the economic burden of schools, especially in their critical startup years, that we actually only will charge a 2% fee to our schools. And in 2013, we charged a total of a little bit over $64,000 for our schools. We put forth, if you go to the next slide, Claire, we put forth the fiscal year 2013 budget to give the members of the board an understanding of how those fees are being spent. It's a little bit tricky with the ICSB in the fact that we were incubated with the State Board of Education for the first couple years of our existence. So you can see that this really represents only a half year and where our fees went. Can you go to the next slide? So really, when we were authorized or created as an independent agency, Really, it was designed to foster and create an authorizer that was focused really on approving and authorizing high-quality charter schools as well as innovative charter schools. And so the board was very deliberate in setting out the mission, which was really to authorize and hold accountable a portfolio of high-performing charter schools in which students achieve high levels of growth and graduate prepared for college and career readiness, which I think is a laudable goal that everybody here would agree with. And we also set forth a set of guiding principles that would really mark our approach to authorizing new schools. It was really put the students first. How do we make sure that we are providing educational opportunities for these students? Set high expectations for the schools, much like we ask them to set high expectations for students. We in turn would expect high performance from our schools as well. Commitment to leadership, commitment to innovation, and then one of the things that we learned based upon consultations with NACSA and also some of the challenges that some of our other authorizers have had is really a commitment to accountability and transparent accountability. One of the things that our board of directors was focused on and that the staff is focused on as well is that we always want our schools that are under our portfolio to know the accountability standards that they are being judged upon, as well as for the public to understand how we are managing and judging our schools under our portfolio. So if you can go to the next slide. So since its inception, what we've really done is work in a strategic planning process with our board of directors, really to create what we consider one of the top authorizers in the nation. So when the ICSB was created, in addition to benchmarking with Ball State, as well as the mayor's office here in Indiana, we also went out and looked across the country to find out who were the best authorizers around the country and really benchmark against them. So we had a lot of conversations with SUNY, the public school system in Denver, Washington, D.C., the Achievement School District in Tennessee, as well as a lot of conversation with NACSA and Public Impact, which is a educational think tank out of North Carolina. Our goal was really to create the best authorizer that we could. And so we really tried to take a lot of their good work and really formulate a lot of our policies and procedures. Part of what we do on that is when we review applications, we not only review by staff as well as our board of directors, but we also bring in experts from around the country who have reviewed countless other applications to provide an outside perspective as well as best practice on that. Again, as I mentioned before, we communicate and are very transparent with our accountability standards to all of our schools as well as to the public. And we continuously benchmark against other top authorizers to ensure that we're maintaining high levels of high standards for our authorizing. We had Chicago Public Schools in just a couple weeks ago to learn from them. And actually NACSA, which is the National Association of Charter Schools, we just completed an audit with them 2 months ago to ensure that even though we're only 3 years old, and even though they say that we're hitting all 12 of their 12 best practices, that we're continually, constantly trying to improve and to make the ICSB one of the stronger authorizers in the nation. So we've set up some strong policies and procedures, and currently the ICSB has under its portfolio a total of 9 charter schools scattered throughout the state. However, that's taken a fair amount of work went into authorizing those 9 schools. So since our inception, we have conducted 4 application cycles. We've reviewed over 41 applications. We've held 25 public hearings. Again, our commitment to transparency really comes forth in that we really want the public to feel like they are part of the decision to grant charter schools, and then ultimately 9 charter schools have been opened by the ICSB. Those represent schools around the state, the Thurgood Marshall Leadership Academy up in Fort Wayne, a number of Excel centers, which are by Goodwill, chartered throughout the state in Anderson, Kokomo, Lafayette, and Richmond. Here in Indianapolis, Carpe Diem Meridian, the George and Veronica Phelan Leadership Academy, Nexus Academy, which is up at Glendale Mall, as well as our brand new school, which opened just on Monday. We're very excited about that, the Indianapolis Academy of Excellence. We also will have 4 more schools that will be opening in next year. Fortunately for us, due to the relative youth of our organization, the ICSB has not had to close a school down, which is why I still have some blonde hair up here and it's not all gray. But we also have had some challenges of schools that we have granted charters to that have not been able to open. Now, I highlight this for everyone to understand some of the challenging environmental factors that we have here in the state of Indiana, and that we had a number of schools that we granted charters to. We felt they were innovative, good school models that would really help children in their educational pursuit, but unfortunately they were unable for a number of reasons to open, and the vast majority of those is in the securing of facilities. And so this remains a source of concern for us, and one thing I just want to highlight to the State Board of Education, that's a potentially limiting factor for the growth of charter schools. Okay. So how are our schools doing? Well, again, at the 2012-2013, we only had 3 schools in our portfolio. So Excel Center, which is an adult high school, again, is somewhat in an alternative status because they're an adult high school. So we look at our schools on 3 different factors. We look at academics, we look at financial, and we look at compliance. The Excel Center, due to its nature and its early status, did not have the academic grades yet. But again, we look at the financial, and they were meeting financial performance, and they were also meeting our compliance performance. Thurgood Marshall Leadership Academy was lower on the scores for English as well as math. I'm happy to report that math score has increased dramatically in this year, so we're not to where we want to be. We're up to around the 50% range, but again, it's nice to see that they're trending in the correct manner, and we're really looking forward to increased performance from those guys over the next couple of years. And then Carpe Diem here in Indianapolis had some pretty strong scores in the first year. Their latest ISTEP scores show a very similar performance, and so we're very excited for Carpe Diem, and we're very excited for Carpe Diem to continue to expand in the Indianapolis area and bring great education to the students here. Any questions? I try to go pretty fast since it's the end of the day for all of
We
us.
appreciate it. We've been here since before 9.
I wish I had a lot of questions to ask. This is very-
Thanks for your leadership. Keep the air.
Thank you so much.
Indianapolis Mayor's Office of Education Innovation.
Hi, Joy Patterson, Calumet College of St. Joseph. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. We have only been in the authorizing business for 1 year. We are the oldest university in Lake County, 60 years old, and we have a very strong mission to serve all students by any means necessary, and we have a very strong social justice mission. And I say that because we never intended to get into charter school business. Our business is serving students and serving our community, which is how we found ourselves, you know, a year later in the charter school business. We only have 1 charter school, and we responded to that charter school because of our community and the needs of our parents and the students. So a few slides I'm going to, we can change slides, the guiding principles. So a few I'm going to skip because as probably the last authorizer, we stand on the backs of all the other authorizers, and we've learned lots of principles, and our guiding principles align to the National Charter School Standards, as well as aligns very closely to what the other authorizers are doing, because literally we have learned a lot from them, as well as our own experience as a higher ed institution. So we maintain high standards. Of course, we use a variety of rubrics. We can change slides. So we use a variety of rubrics aligned to national standards. We have an accountability system in place. We have weekly observation, and that's something that's very different than what you might hear. We have an accountability officer who is at the school at least 10 hours a week. So we are there every week, having informal observations, formal observation, informal feedback on a weekly basis, and formal feedback. We haven't had the opportunity, and hopefully we never will, to approach school closure, but we came close this year, even after authorizing for 1 year. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but there were issues with progress and some administration as well as budget. And we came very close to a school closure this year, and some changes that were made is that we went to a monthly progress monitoring system so that we can make decisions early in the 11 months that we've been authorizing. That's not enough time to make a decision about the future of students. So we now have a monthly monitoring process in place. We have new leadership, and there's more oversight. And we are expecting a short-term turnaround. So we uphold school autonomy. We hold everyone accountable. We hold the school leaders accountable. We hold the board accountable. We attend, and I attend myself, along with the accountability officer, every board meeting, and we provide them with a dashboard report. And we go into executive session every month with the board meeting, and we talk about strengths and weakness, and we come up with a strategy of how we're going to fix them prior to the next month. So we ensure that they have quality staff, teachers and staff, and we ensure that they also have a strong budget, okay? You know, our other goal is to protect the student and public interest, and I would say this is what caused us to actually become authorizers in responding to the needs of the public, the parents and the students in the middle of the school building a new building. I want to show you a sample of the dashboard report. The next slide. You can't see the details, but it gives you a glimpse of what we provide the board with. So we have a quick dashboard report, and it highlights all the key areas that we're looking for on a weekly basis, and we give the board a snapshot. Are we in good stead? Are there things that we're concerned about? And are there things that are very alarming? And as you can see, in 1 year, we're still in the red in several very, very key categories, and we're addressing that. Looking at the state standards, the test scores, you will see in some areas there is improvement. Improvement in ISTEP did not improve this past year. And I'm reporting old information. I don't have the information for 2013, 2014 is incomplete. We were not authorizers in 2012, 2013. So all of my information is not up to date, but I did want to give you a glimpse. They are improving in Dibble, so there's significant improvement there. If we go to the next slide and we look at growth, we can see lots of growth in the elementary grades, not so much growth in the middle school grades. So we're continuing to focus on that. If we look at attendance, there's been significant growth in attendance at every grade level. Did want to say a little bit about our board members. The board members is a good representation of the community. They have the right people on the board in terms of discipline and commitment. However, we do have a board that is unseasoned and need to go back through training to hold the school leaders more accountable. Next slide regarding our administration fees. We only have one charter school, so the administration fees are pretty cut and dry. But I was asked a very important question, which is the last slide. Why keep a failing school open? When we accepted Charter School of the Dunes had an F. And they were being closed by Ball State. And then they reached out to us. Not only did they reach out to us, the parents reached out to us, and 5 different banks reached out to us because they were 75% finishing a new structure after being in a dilapidated building for about 12 years. So we responded to an outcry from the community. Again, we had turned down many proposals prior to this, not ready to get into the charter school business. However, in responding to a need, we decided to take a chance and authorize and hold the Charter School of the Dunes accountable. And we did that because when you weigh your options in the city of Gary, they are still the best option. So on paper, they may have an F, but when you walk into the classrooms, when you walk through the buildings, when you see the students engage, when you see the teachers teaching, they are not an F school. And they are the best alternative right now in Gary. The attendance, they have excellent attendance. It is a very secure and safe environment, and now a state-of-the-art environment. They have a very high special education population of about 35%, which is a very high. However, the parents find that it's very safe and the education is, and their kids are well served at the charter school of the Dunes, and that's going to impact their score too. And then they have wonderful resources. The other thing is proximity. In terms of proximity, we knew that there's a stronger commitment and that we had accessibility to them. It makes it possible for me to go to every board meeting, and it makes it possible for the accountability officer to be there every week. So proximity made a big difference. And we've put a lot of things in place, some formative and summative assessments. We've put monthly progress monitoring in, and we want to provide adequate time for them to make change. This is a school that's been in existence for 12 years. It's going to take longer than 1 year for the school to improve. We want to give them that opportunity, and we're willing to stand behind them and hold them accountable so that they can reach all of those steps. So we've provided a number of benchmarks, so if we have to make a decision for school closure, that we have enough evidence and we've given them enough opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other charter board authorizers here to present?
Madam Superintendent,
Yes.
I can stay for just a little bit longer, but I have got to get on the road. I could join by phone. I've got an hour and a half drive to where I have to get to.
I'll go really
No, just wait
Yeah.
just one
I'm
moment.
worried about us keeping a quorum.
Because, well, me too, but the quorum, we don't have any votes that we need to do, so I'm not sure but these other items you've received already. I just want to take a brief look at the
Mhm.
agenda. So you've received the annual report, the AP report. If you've got questions about that, I urge you to contact Leslie Fathom at the department. The CTE update, Peggy Wild is a contact that you certainly can, I think she gave you the information as well. Accountability update, I do know that we can bring that actually back to the next meeting in September without any issue. And because we're going to be talking to you perhaps about moving the October meeting, so that we can bring those grade placements and have those be done at the appropriate time, and rather than perhaps having a special meeting or two meetings, so we can talk about that prior to our September meeting. The waiver date, the waiver update, I really already have given you the information. I have no update. And the school performance awards, Carrie, you put that on, and I believe that you had some information. You got a direct contact from Sarah Pease at my department. There's an FAQ online that is in total accordance with the what was passed in the legislature, and we worked with Senator Mishler and Senator Kinley to be sure that that was correct. So if you've got questions about that, you can call Sarah Pease. So these other items on here, I believe you have information. Do you have information, Claire, that you must share with the board today, or can you?
I cut it down to one thing, and I think Bob had one thing. We'll keep it for 2 minutes.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I think we could probably just defer the rest of the items, and if you have questions, we'll put something out to the board that if they have questions about them, they can do that. So go ahead, please, and present. And then we'll just do the last part of State Board of Education update.
All right, so I know you all are exhausted, and I think we just got the meeting record, so I think we're over 8 hours. So nice work today. Brandon Brown, I am the Charter Schools Director for the Mayor's Office. You all hear from us really regularly, so we'll go really quickly, and you actually have the presentation in front of you. So a unique thing about the Mayor's Office is that we're only, so in 2001, we were the first Mayor's Office in the country to have the ability to authorize schools. Right now, we're one of 2 mayor's offices in the entire country to have that ability. So the next slide shows you the growth of our schools over time. So from 2002 to 2014, we are now at 39 schools. So 4 of those are actually the turnaround schools that we oversee, which you guys clearly know about that. And then the vast majority of other schools are clearly charter schools. So this slide just shows you the trajectory in terms of the enrollment. So we're projecting to serve close to 16,000 students in our schools this year. If you put that in perspective, if we were considered a school district, we'd be the 2nd largest school district in Marion County. So this just generally gives you an overview of the application process. What I will say is that roughly 18% of applicants that submit an application to the mayor's office will be approved. So we try to be really rigorous, really transparent during that process. You all know that we use the Mayor's Performance Framework to evaluate our schools. It has 27 indicators that we look at to assess school performance on a yearly basis. These were actually 2012-2013 results. We just received the 2013 results, 2013-2014 results Monday, which are pretty similar to last year. So on average, 73% of mayor-sponsored charter school students are proficient in English, and 74% are proficient in math. The vast majority of our students are actually from IPS, so when you compare it to the school district where they live, we are significantly outperforming IPS students. Graduation rate data. So in total, 81% of mayor-sponsored charter school students graduated on time this year. And what I want to highlight is that the waiver use for mayor-sponsored charter schools is significantly lower than the state average, the city average, and the average of the school district where the vast majority of our students come from. We're opening up 5 new schools this year. You can see the list on the PowerPoint. And then we actually worked with the charter school board to close the school. So Monument Lighthouse Charter School closed this year, and it was a unique process. So the school board looked at their long-term school performance, made a decision that it did not meet expectations, and chose not to seek charter renewal. So it was actually a very collaborative way to close the school. We now have a new charter operator in that facility for this year. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight a few of the innovative models. So the mayor is really interested in making sure that we're spurring innovation. So the Francis Marion Academy, which you may have read about a few weeks ago, will be the first charter school of its kind inside the juvenile center. So we're really excited to leverage the ability to have charter schools to serve students who need it the most. And then we have a few other schools in our portfolio that I would say are extremely innovative and are great examples of how we should be using the charter law. I think one of the things nationally that charter schools haven't really captured is the true ability to be exceptionally innovative. So we're always trying to spur new ideas from exceptional educators. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions?
Great, thanks.
Ball State?
Yes, thank you. My name is Bob Mayer. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Charter Schools. Madam Chair and members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. And I will be as brief as possible, so if you have questions, I know it's been a long day. Vision and mission, why we got into this. As Brandon just said, we're looking for innovative choices, high quality, and trying to get schools options for parents in different places. Go ahead, Claire. Projection of where we were, started out low, we're about 22,000 students. Keep on going, Claire, I can go. We're all around the state, mostly northern Indiana, Gary area, but spread around. We have urban schools, we have rural schools. One of the things I just point out on this chart, this is our demographic data. The really important thing to please look at, if you look at the range is really important. It's at least to Bob, as I looked at this over time. We have things that, special ed, you got 7% up to 32. You have almost black schools, almost all white schools. So ranges are important rather than an average sometimes. An average is just that. It's an average, doesn't tell you a whole lot. Go ahead, Claire. This was a morning discussion. These are just the various types of schools we have. We have K-5, K-6. You can see that. I wanted you to see that the discussion this morning. People are growing into their school, or they chose to have a 7-12. Don't know why. That's what they wanted. Just the conversation about A through F is important to look at, that we have a wide variety and then your data points are different. We have that, and I just wanted to emphasize that. Key components of transforming, you can just hit them all, Claire, and get up there. I'll be real quick. Look, we went ahead since I got there under Dean Jacobson. We had a thorough authorized review by NACSTA, came in, did a thorough evaluation. We got into a PMRC grant, performance management replication grant that, as Nick said, we worked with other authorized around the state to redo our system. We created and streamlined our process. We do an annual report. And Claire, if you go to the next one real quick. So from that learning, what I did was we have the same frameworks as the mayor, as the chartering board, and I redid my my staff, and so I have a staff person in charge of each one of the frameworks now, where we had field reps that went out and were generalists, now I have specialists, and so that's a major change in our thing. Go ahead, Claire. Yeah, they'll pop it in there. Performance data, again, I would ask you to look at the range in the sense that if you look at where we are with math, language arts, and pass both, we have low scores in some schools and high scores in other schools. We're up to 90%. The same way with grad rate. If you look at grad rate, yep, there's a school with 5%. It's brand new school, dropout recovery, but my point is we have a range up to 100% in the waiver. The thing that I was asked to emphasize a little bit, we went through the non-renewals in 12, 13. There were 9 schools we recommend. 5 of them actually closed. 2, as you just heard, Charter School of the Dunes went over to St. Joe, and Timothy L. Johnson went over the Trine. And I want to emphasize Imagine Master and Imagine Broadway got converted into private schools. The Imagine company, the EMO that runs them, changed them over the private schools. So you can make an argument that they were closed as a charter school, but they then opened up as a private school, and that's the list. And we had 5 out of those, and we went to hearing or reconsideration, and the hearing board upheld 5 out of 5 decisions. People want to know what each school generates. That's what that is. Hopefully you can read it a little better in your chart. Those are our fees. Those changed. They went down from last, in the 13-14 year because we're missing 11 schools. If you go to the next slide, those are our expenditures. Unlike the other authorizers that either get money from the appropriation or some of that, we kind of put back in to our schools. We pay for the board audit, we pay for NWEA, we pay for board training. So we tried, if you go to the next slide, we call it invest in our school, and we try to do these activities where we take the money and do that. So it isn't, you have to pay for your on-site, you have to pay for your audit. BSU pays for that out of its 3% and so forth. And then the last one, this was just a slide, press release when we did close or non-renew schools that NACSTA came out and said Ball State should be commended for getting a new framework in place and having a credible thing. So we're under the umbrella, and I also wanted, just my last comment would be, we're working very closely with both the chartering board and the mayor's office to come together, because I think the key to quality authorizing is all the authorizers in the state really have the same, and we're really close to being exactly the same on how we evaluate schools.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bob, I think you have a couple items. State Board of Ed staff update.
Yeah, I really have 3 quick things. First is, if you noticed, we sent a planning calendar to you. That planning calendar will consist of statute, regulation, and actions that you take that are required. We want to make it a living document so that next month, there were a couple things mentioned today that were planned that are needed to be done next month, so they will be on there next month. And then we will highlight what the next month is, what October is going to be as we send that out to you. Second is National Association of State Boards of Education, and I sent emails to everyone asking for comments. Do we want to spend the dollars and rejoin that organization? And I just wanted to get some consensus that we should join or not join. So please give that consideration, and in the next 3 or 4 days, if you haven't responded, please do.
Will you email us back out and let us know what the final verdict is on that?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm actually.
Yeah, you can. If you haven't responded, you could tell me here what your thoughts are on whether we join that or not. We have like 5 yeses and 2 no's at this point. Yeah, could you just let me know if you want us to join there? That's 6, 7. Okay. Gary Dunbar.
I've got a quick question regarding the calendar.
Okay.
So in September, we're going to have a charter authorizer update again.
There are some other charter authorizers that, there's 11 of them, I think, throughout the state. So the others will be here to present, rather than do it all in one meeting.
Okay. And how often is that to happen?
Once a year.
Okay, thank you.
Gary Dunbar, August 11th is their hearing. Just would encourage all of you, or any of you that can attend, to be there.
Bob, can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
I sent a message back. I can't be there on the 11th. I can be there on the 12th.
It's only the 11th.
And I just have one thing I wanted to, for transparency, point out that we are going to be extending the contract with Damien Bedebenner, which at the dollar amount is within the threshold you have already authorized for the State Board of Ed staff to enter into those contracts, but I just wanted to make sure that I brought that to your attention. I think we're skipping the accountability update, but Debbie and I and Danielle Shockey met earlier about continued work that we want Damien to do to help us support us in the final changes to A through F. So we are going to be extending that contract to make sure that we can have his expertise to advise the board. So I just want to make sure I was being transparent. If you have questions about it, please let me know. And that's all.
Very good.
Thank you. So I just want to reiterate the following discussion items, that if any board member has questions regarding the reports that were submitted, you can contact the Department of Education. That would be 2013 Annual AP Report, the CT Update, Accountability Update, Waiver Update, and School Performance Awards Update. Seeing no other business to come before the board, have a motion to adjourn. Second. Those in favor say aye. Aye. This meeting is adjourned.